And we're very happy to co-host this seminar about new business opportunities in Southeast Asia. I've been fortunate enough to live abroad for the last 10 years, a majority in Asia Pacific, mainly China, India, and now Southeast Asia for the last 4 years. And we see great potential, but we see less presence of Sweden. So it's great to see a full house here today. And I'm very happy to do this together with some of the leading investors and leading startups that we see in Southeast Asia. And thank you Stockholm FinTech Hub, Mats and Matthew and Adam for hosting this and making this possible. So really looking forward for a dynamic dialogue on what opportunities we see and what we can collaborate to bring more Swedishness to Southeast Asia and Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. For those of you who haven't been here before, this is the version 1 of the Stockholm FinTech Hub. We launched in March?
Actually, end of January.
End of January this year. And we're now at 267 FinTech members. So we're very thankful for everybody to support us so far. We're going to kick off today with Håkan, who's the ambassador for Singapore. And we'll have some coffees and talks afterwards, but after that.
Great. Thank you so much. Great to see so many people here today showing interest in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And of course, we're very proud to, of course, Team Sweden to host this together with the FinTech Hub and key players, Tribe and Dusan with True Global Ventures as well. Will be making this a great seminar, we truly hope. Singapore and Southeast Asia is really booming, and we work extremely hard to attract more Swedish and Nordic interest, even European interest, into this region. A region with, even though there are some complications out there when it comes to stability, corruption and so on, but this is a region that truly delivers 5 to 7% growth the last 5 and the coming 10 years. So you truly have to be there. Singapore then is also an amazing place to be, climbing the ladders in every ranking more or less now. In some indexes they have passed Hong Kong now, being the third most important financial hubs globally. So it's New York, London, and Singapore and Hong Kong. This is an always ongoing fight. You should know that Hong Kong and Singapore, who is the key player. But truly, Singapore has some great advantages for the time being. Another index is saying that Singapore is now the second most globalized city in the world after London. And if you read the speculations now with Brexit and so on, Singapore might very well turn out to be number 1 in that index. So for us to see a big Swedish interest is absolutely great. And we have been working for quite some time of sort of allocating the interest more to this region. It's very natural to look to the west, to the US, of course. But what we see when it comes to the opportunities and possibilities in this region, it's massive. Some people might think also that, Singapore, what is that? A small region of, a small country with only 5.5 million inhabitants. So what kind of market is that? But looking to it as a financial hub, but also as a hub for almost any industry is key. And one example, I think, is mentioning Singtel, and of course that's the Telia of Singapore. And you say, okay, 5.5 million people, so they have some people using their services. They have now 600 million customers in Southeast Asia and Australia. So that's massive, and those are the opportunities. If you really go into to the environment, you might find amazing opportunities. So 650 million people living in Southeast Asia, and the biggest country for the time being is Indonesia, 250 million, growing, stronger middle class, so go there and be successful. Yeah, it's very easy. Right? And as you know, as a civil servant with the taxpayers paying my salary, it's very easy. I should also mention that we have increasingly support from different players. Of course, Business Sweden work closely, but also Ministry of Enterprises here, which actually shows the government is interested in this region. And I see SEK, Svensk Exportkredit as well. There is a broad package of support to actually go there. Finally, I would just like to say a few words regarding Swedish presence in Singapore. We are approximately 2,000 Swedes in Singapore today, 250 Swedish companies. We need to be more. And we have some key players. We have Mr. Marcus Wallenberg on the board of Temasek, and Temasek is the investment company of the finance ministry of the government, so it's like the investor of Singapore. And to have Mr. Marcus Wallenberg on that board is a massive impact, of course, and really a great achievement by the Wallenberg family to be in that position. We also have Mr. Bertil Andersson heading the Nanyang Technological University, and this is an important connection for Sweden because he usually says, when I'm here in Singapore, I have more Swedish industry money than I ever had when I was the president of Linköping University. So there is an attraction moving from Swedish companies actually to do research and business in Singapore. And then until recently also we had Mr. Magnus Böcker, who very, very sadly passed away a few weeks ago. And Mr. Magnus Böcker, as you know, very important fintech player and the chairman of Tribe, who's here today. And with his background, he has really been one of the key drivers in changing the fintech environment in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And he, of course, will be dearly missed, and our thoughts are with him and his family. So with those words, I hope you will enjoy this day. It's great to see so many of you. I hope that we will have air in here all the whole seminar. And now I think it's time to hook up with Singapore. Yes. Thank you so much.
We're doing Skype, another Swedish startup. Is this correct? This is when they don't answer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning, Singapore. Good afternoon, even.
Hi, good morning, Sweden. Can you hear me?
Yeah. The video's not working, but the
You can see the slides? Can you see the slides?
No.
I'll share my screen with you. Hang on. Are you able to see my slides?
No. I've got them here, so I'll put them up, okay? Oh, here they're coming. They're coming.
Are you able to see the slides now?
Yeah, yeah.
The slides should work now.
So it's over to you now, Aaron.
Is it working? Hello?
This isn't working. We're taking
Hello,
slides off.
you guys hear me?
Yeah, but it sounds like you've got an aeroplane in the background. Alright, we'll start again. We've practiced this 3 times this morning, I promise.
Otherwise, sometimes kill the video.
Yeah, I'll kill the video, yeah.
And ask me to turn off the Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Are you there, Aaron?
She's unmuted.
Seems to be in there.
Okay, this isn't working very well, is it?
Give that 2 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
If you disable the video, will it help?
I'm trying to put the slides up again.
Yeah.
Hey,
All right.
cool.
Do we have any sound? Can you hear us?
If you turn off your video, maybe it helps.
They're muted now.
If you just click on the video icon,
Click on the video.
then my.
That's not working, is it?
No.
Let's just do a voice call.
They sound
Can you hear
So
me?
universal that sound.
in my dreams.
Can you hear me?
They're muted, I
Some
think.
nightmares depending on how the call.
Right, I think we're going to give this a miss. I think we have to give it a miss. So, we will try and get the technical issues out of the way. So we'll start with the panel now. And if we can get back in the end, then we can have a 5-minute with the guys.
I think it will be even better.
Yeah?
If they are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dusan, would you like to come
Yeah,
and start
sure.
with the discussion?
Okay, so we are supposed to talk a little bit about the Singapore fintech environment. So we need chairs.
Yep,
So
they're
let's do
here.
that.
These four?
I can stand.
You stand, okay?
You guys sit. So let's see. I want Marcus here. I want Iraj here, and then I want you guys as well.
All right.
Right. Okay. So here we have the fantastic group that we managed to get. So it's all well thought through. A little bit more of an investor, a little bit more of an entrepreneur, a little bit more of an investor, a little bit more of an entrepreneur. So we can get some debate here.
What are you?
And I'm kind of trying both, but I'm a little bit more of an investor. Right. So Marcus, who are you? What do you do?
Hi,
Very quickly,
yes,
each of you.
Marcus, actually German, so I'm not Swedish, but I live in Singapore for 3 years now. I'm co-founder and CEO of Tribe, and late Marcus Walker, one of my co-founders.
I'm Neeraj Mararka, co-founder and CTO of Buzel Networks. Started in Canada, moved the company to Singapore 18 months ago.
I'm Frank Schell. I'm originally Dutch, living in Stockholm. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cefello, a Bitcoin exchange, and I have Rhino Ventures, through which I invest in different ICOs and cryptocurrency.
And you've been how many times to Singapore?
2 times, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Dirk. I'm from Berlin. I'm the founder and CEO of Striking Entertainment, and so we are now working also on getting something done in Singapore.
Okay, so now we try to understand what is getting something done. So what do you do in more detail? Why don't we start there? What is actually your company doing?
Yeah, so we are in the fantasy sports space. That means we are operating a platform called Football Stars. So it's for football fans. That means it's a fan engagement game, so to say. The fantasy sports as a segment is very big in the US, so there are 20% almost of the population are playing those games regularly. But for the proper football that we are covering, like European football, this is just coming up now because all the detailed statistics which are necessary for this kind of game they are now available since only a couple of years. So like successful passes, successful tackles, etc. Because it's all about the fan competition, that fans try to prove that they are the better expert than their buddies. So you try to predict which players in real life are going to perform very well. So we have, for example, an official license of the German Bundesliga, and we also have the other big leagues in there, but that means that I, as a user, try to say, okay, which Bundesliga players are going to perform at the next match day very well, and I compete against other fans with that. And then I have to save my virtual squad 1 hour before the actual matches are happening, and then after the matches we do import real-life performance data from one of the big data providers. And so that means if I was better with my virtual team of real players than my opponents, then I win. And then it has different game mechanics in there. And so it's all about this fan motivation to be very close to their favorite sports. And this is something we are now operating from Germany and are moving now to roll it out in Europe and Asia.
And I think you're touching the point. So my best Singaporean friends, by the way, I live in Singapore, Kelly Cho and Joe Sang, they were just asking Dushan, do you want some tickets for Chelsea Bayern playing August 6th in Singapore? What's going on? What's attractive about Asia? Why do you want to go there?
Yeah, because for us, there are two main things. There's a big fan base for European football, because the biggest names in terms of players and clubs are obviously in the big European leagues. And the Chinese, I think Bayern Munich alone claims to have 130 million fans in China. and also that means, and for the European clubs, they're the best way to really grow and to grow the international fan base is obviously to look at the Asian territories, and that's also the motivation when we are speaking to clubs in terms of partnerships, because we're trying to partner up with the Bundesliga clubs because we can offer them a really tight engagement tool. The main argument for them is that we are really trying to target the Asian territories and give them the chance to directly get in touch with the Asian fan base, because that's the way that a product like ours can do. So it's about engaging with the sports because you're getting very close. You need to do research, you need to watch the highlights, and then you have your fun by playing a game like ours. So for us, it's obviously the European countries are interesting, but even more potential is in the Asian countries where we can have a first mover advantage as well, because these fantasy sports games are just coming up. And so there are two things. One is a very high affinity for games itself. So that's in what you have in China, Korea, Japan, and other countries. And the second one, there's a high passion and an interest in European football.
Frank, I failed to invest in your company 3.5 years ago, I think, when we first met, which I'm still kind of a little bit angry about. You were at one of my first events ever 2.5 years ago. And Safello, what you're doing two things. You're running your company, but you also do some investments. But if you tell us, what is Safello doing, first of all?
Did you invest in crypto at least?
I can still invest in the company, I know. And I wasn't there in the beginning, which is a shame. Go ahead.
So yeah, it was 2013, and so I've done 2 startups before this, and then there was a location-based social network, and then interpositioning, kind of techie, and then I wanted to figure out what I was going to do next, and it was cryptocurrency was just going to.
By the way, how did you end up in Sweden?
My previous company. So
okay.
We were, was in Malmö. So first Malmö, now in Stockholm.
Yeah.
And at the time, so I was looking at 2012, but the Bitcoin price was nothing, $15, and then
How much is it now?
It's $4,300. Then it was $15 when I looked at it. I didn't invest in it.
Shame.
Shame on me. But so I wanted to do it through an entity that was setting up Rhino Ventures.
Yeah.
So, but that took way too long, and then the price in April 2013 went to $266. And then, like most people nowadays at $4,300 say, like, okay, I'm not going to invest. I decided, okay, I obviously missed something here. So I did start investing in Bitcoin and in Ripple and some other cryptocurrencies through that company. And at the same time, then it opened up my eyes to the potential of this technology, the blockchain technology that's underlying it all. So I wanted to build the ecosystem, which became Safello, where we wanted to make it easy and safe and simple for people to buy and sell Bitcoin. At that time, hacks and scams were taking place all the times. Anyone who remembers a headline from 2013 probably remembers how bad it was. I'm glad to say that over the years it's been very much professionalized and it's been growing a lot, and so have we. We've been growing, especially the last couple of months, quite well. In 2016, we acquired an ICBit, the first futures exchange in the world. We're working on an interesting deal that I can't say anything about right now.
And everybody got very curious now?
Yes, that's the point, but otherwise nothing. And then through Rhino Ventures now with the ICO craze, I've been investing in a couple, and I'm silently, I must say, advising some people that are starting ICO. So what is an ICO? An initial coin offering. It's basically creating a token through which people are raising money to develop a network or a product that utilizes this token, typically in one way or another. So that's, we're going to talk more about ICOs.
So you have your own company and you also do investments?
Yes, I mean, yes. Only crypto, pretty much.
Okay.
So since 2013 I was starting.
And you mentioned Ripple.
I mentioned Ripple, yes.
And Ripple, that was my thing, another thing that I
Yes.
missed out. So I was looking at Ripple, was it in 2010-11?
Yeah.
I thought the valuation was $200 million. They basically had nothing in terms of customers. And I have never invested into a company with $200 million of revenue, of valuation and zero revenues. So I did not invest.
Yeah.
What is the market cap of Ripple now?
I think it's 7 billion or 6
Okay.
to 7 billion.
I missed that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
But we'll go back also to the disadvantages of. You remember '99 when it was going all the way up?
Yes.
And it never ended up, but then it went down. So we'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
Ripple, that's indirectly how I got to know you, Niraj.
Yes.
Maybe I'll do a little bit of the translation how I got to know you. So Ripple is one of those cryptocurrencies, but they also have things that they have to fix. So they had in those days so-called bounties. So it means that any kind of open source developer can actually fix something for the Ripple protocol. So they would set up a little bounty and see if any open source developer could fix that. And I had a company called Bounty Source that actually could fix those and still do that for many different cryptocurrencies. But then, by getting to know Ripple and the relationship we had with Bounty Source, the key chief of engineering there actually introduced me to Niraj and Pavel. And that was a little bit later. When was it about? It was before moving to Singapore.
Yeah, it was 2015, I want to
Yeah,
say.
it must be 2015, right?
Yes.
Kind of endish there.
Yes.
So what do you do? What does your company actually do? Buzel, right?
Yes.
You've done a couple of things, but now you kind of find it. What do you do?
So we started the company in 2014 in Canada. So I'm just going to give a quick history. And our initial thesis was remittance to India. So my CEO, actually, not being a technical guy, was wiser than me and actually suggested Ripple. And I actually had a connection with Ripple. So I actually used my contacts to get in touch with Ripple, and ultimately we got connected to Dusha, fortunately.
And actually, before that, Niraj, you were first employee in some kind of Bitcoin company before that?
Yeah, I was one of the early persons working with a company called ZeroBlock, and it got acquired by blockchain.info in Silicon Valley, so I was employee number 4. Interesting little backstory with that. They asked me whether I wanted to be paid in cash or Bitcoin in 2014. If you know the timing, well, I chose Bitcoin, which initially seemed like a good idea, except Bitcoin went from 1,200 US to 300 US shortly after the project ended. So my hour power dropped quite a bit. Fortunately, I held on to my Bitcoin. I didn't sell any of it.
Maybe that's a good piece of advice. It's a long-term thing. Right?
Yeah, well,
it's not like...
Yeah, I'm not a day trader. I'm not an investor. I'm sitting here as an entrepreneur and developer. Yeah. So I sat on it. Good for me.
And you can refinance Buzel partly by that.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope Bitcoin keeps going up.
So what does Buzel do?
So we actually build enterprise blockchain solutions. So in Singapore, we've been building. We've actually built a protocol stack for banks, insurance companies, and developers that allows them to use blockchain and decentralized technologies to build enterprise products. So for example, we recently completed a enterprise KYC solution for a consortium of 3 banks in Southeast Asia. And we've also built smart insurance for a major Asian insurance company. And we've also been doing travel insurance, which is smart insurance built upon Ethereum, for those of you familiar with it. So you can travel with your smartphone, and you can automatically make claims. Claims get approved by automatically on Ethereum smart contracts.
So you're solving really a problem. It's not just speculation.
Oh no, we're solving a lot of pain points.
Okay.
And driving down the cost of running these products using blockchain technology. So fast forward to where we are now. One of the key pain points we've discovered in building these enterprise products is there's a big missing piece. You've got your applications like status. You hear about all these ICOs coming out, all these decentralized products. So they're sitting at an application level, and they're using something like Ethereum, which is your operating environment for smart contracts. And then you've got a lot of different infrastructure plays like Filecoin storage for file storage. What's really missing, which is key to developing, is database. There's no decentralized database layer in that big puzzle of the decentralized internet. And that's where Buzel comes in. We've actually been building out a decentralized database. It's not a blockchain, but it uses blockchain-like technology, everything we know, to build that database stack so that the new internet, which is decentralized, is going to have database services. Just like how Oracle came out 20, 30 years ago, and now they're a multi-billion-dollar company, we're positioning ourselves to be that decentralized Oracle database for the new internet.
That sounds good. We'll see if it works.
Yes.
Okay, Marcus.
Wow, no pressure. Yeah.
When did we meet?
Actually, the same time when we moved to Singapore almost.
April 7th,
Yes.
2014. First day on the Monday.
In your calendar, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the first thing I did was jumping into your workshop.
Yeah.
What did you do?
So,
what did you
yeah, so I was
before
in Singapore,
and in Singapore.
Yeah, so a company I founded in London was a startup bootcamp fintech, which maybe some of you know. Startup bootcamp fintech was back then, or still is, the largest incubator for fintech companies. I was based in London, and then Singapore government, the MAS guys, reached out saying, hey, why don't you come to Singapore? We need more fintech. So we moved out to Singapore together, really, same time almost. And I think there were 18 or something fintech companies back then in Singapore. Now they're 350. So within 3 years, you see the amount of fintech companies exploding in ASEAN and Singapore in particular.
What was the bet that you took on Singapore? Why did you go to Singapore?
So I think London was a bit, in a way, overrated. And I think also very saturated in itself. And I felt that Singapore as a hub for the ASEAN region, and Mr. Ambassador shared the numbers, I think staggering to see what's happening in Southeast Asia with the underbanked, the underserved, on the B2B side and the B2C side. The growth rates are just very different how they are in Europe. And I think ASEAN as a region is basically like Europe 40 years ago. So still just about to get, I think, more consolidated. I think the fragmentation is loosening up, and you can see how the markets in ASEAN are really come together. And so for me it was, it's ASEAN, but then you have the Chinese coming in, you have the Indians coming in, and I think that's the focus is shifting from the west to the east. And that's why I took a person bet and also business bet on Singapore. And that was where Bootcamp moved out. And then when was it? In May 2015, Magnus Bocker stepped down as CEO from the SGX. Had a very long wine evening with another friend of us, and they decided to do fintech. So then Tribe came together.
So it's Magnus, you, and there's another gentleman. Where is he?
So we're four founders.
There is somebody more here, right?
No, that's unfortunately not.
I left.
They're all working very hard right now.
Okay, all right.
So it's Magnus, Nels, Vaven, and myself.
Okay.
So the name Tribe, TRYB, is also a bit of a wordplay on the word tribe, which we think you got to have everything, bankers, investors, entrepreneurs, Magnus, to really make it work in fintech. It can't just be any one of them. There has to be a tribe. So I think we at Tribe are a technology company, essentially. So we are investing in the building blocks of the infrastructure for financial services in ASEAN.
What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So what it means is that you have currently 50,000 institutions in ASEAN, banks, insurance companies, brokerage firms, not tier 1, not tier 2, who have no technology. Right? You go to Malaysia, you go to Philippines, you go to Myanmar. In Myanmar, there's an entire vault of just cash paper like this in a room, and they have no technology. They just got the first laptops in the bank to work with. So there are no mainframes, no TCS, no Infosys, no Temenos, can really transform, I think, banks. That's the first thing. Secondly, you have finally MAS and others coming out with a cloud policy. So just this year, early this year, MAS and now Thailand and others are saying you can finally deploy data on the cloud and can host it. So that's a big opportunity to actually for SaaS. Blockchain is one thing, blockchain is very exciting, but I think if you look at what happens right now in ASEAN first, to digitize the workflow. How do you take data from paper to the cloud? So a big opportunity to deploy SaaS solutions. So Tribe really is investing and aggregating and consolidating different parts of the infrastructure technologies and asset management, capital markets, trade finance, and looking to invest and most of the time acquire B2B vendors. And one of the companies invested in is Shinsei. I think Carsten runs around also here somewhere from Shinsei, a Swedish company that is doing something in trade finance technology, very exciting. And that's part of our trade finance platform we're looking to consolidate over the next few years. Because I think if you have, 5,000 companies in fintech right now, they can't survive by themselves. So I think it's time for consolidation, for M&A, and that's what we do.
Consolidation M&A?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's the sweet spot?
Sweet spot?
Yeah, or is there one?
So I think sweet spot is you find companies out there that are highly undervalued.
Mm.
I think you find companies out there that after 10, 15, 20 years are getting very lonely.
Yeah.
And if you're B2B, after 15 years you're hitting a certain plateau, and that's where you come in and you need to inject blockchain, smart contracts, big data, AI, and other technologies to up fintech them.
Is that the sweet spot?
That's the sweet spot.
All right.
Yeah. And then you see what you do with them and kind of consolidate into bigger platforms. Because I think what we need is not single solutions. We don't need more silos. We need actually to consolidate the different building blocks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Niraj, let's go into depth about Brussels and blockchain, and especially the latest piece that you now doing, which is kind of the blockchain version of Oracle. It's a little bit complicated to kind of understand. Can you explain what does actually potential customer get out of all that?
The customer in this case,
and who is the customer? Sorry.
Yeah, the customer here is a developer, software developer. So typical software developers need a range of different resources. They need an API. They need a place to store files. They need a place to store data. Some of the database implementations out there use relational databases like SQL, and some of them use something like NoSQL, which is more of a big data, which is actually much more futuristic and able to handle data in a non-relational way. So we've actually taken the second approach, was the NoSQL approach, and we provide an API. So creating, reading, updating, deleting data. Those are the 4 fundamental things you need to do when you're writing to a database. And what our product really is, it's a crypto economy driven by currencies. So one of the important things I must emphasize, I believe in for an ICO or token generating event, is the token generated shouldn't be generated strictly just for fundraising. It should actually have some utility in the service you're providing. So the token that we have is not a security, it's actually something you're getting that allows you to use the service. And what we have is a producer-consumer economy. So the producers are entities. If you have a spare computer, you can use that computer, add it to the network, and you can now generate tokens by providing your hardware to participate in this network. So it's like an Airbnb of databases. On the other side,
Airbnb of databases.
Yes.
That's a pretty good analogy.
yeah.
So how does that work? Everybody participates somehow with his her
Yeah, so
capacity?
you look at the Airbnb metaphor. You've got a spare room or some spare real estate, and you're not doing anything with it; it's idling. Provided, rented out to other people who need it. So you got producers renting out to consumers. In our case, what you're actually renting out to real estate is your computer, your network connectivity, all the extra resources that you might have. Your machine might be off during the night, leave it on and generate some revenue. On the other side, you got the consumers, which are the developers. They need that technology to store data. Traditionally, as they are now, they're using cloud computing, which comes with a lot of serious problems: centralization, there's security issues, there's performance issues, reliability issues. The technology we have actually alleviates most of the problems you're dealing with cloud computing. Your data is actually spread out across the entire network. So there's really no single data center, there's no AWS, there's no Microsoft storing your data, there's no single corporation, it's spread out across the entire network. So it actually presents many advantages.
What are these advantages for a developer?
There's 3 key areas. Scalability. If you're, suddenly there's a spike in demand, your system could crash. Just yesterday or the day before yesterday, they had a big MMA fight or some sort of fight. Many of the servers in the I didn't see the fight, unfortunately, but it's surprising. Despite all the preparation, most of the cable providers in the United States crashed because of the demand. They were not able to sustain that. That's a real problem. So when demand is spiking, you need to be able to handle that. So one of the key things about our network is it will handle those kind of spikes. As soon as there's an increase in demand, the network just automatically adapts because it's got that granularity to deal with scalability. So you're not paying for resources you don't need until you need them. The other area is performance. You need to be able to just have performance, high speed, you need to be able to handle the throughput in general. So because it's spread out and it's distributed over many nodes, you have that level. And then reliability. You don't want the ability for hackers to go in and steal your data. You don't want them to be able to modify your data. There's many different levels of security involved in reliability. With a traditional database or even something centralized on AWS, your data might be stored on multiple machines behind a load balancer, but if I get in there, I can steal all your data. It's in one place. With our network, it's not in one place. Even if I break into one machine, I get 1,000th of your data. I'm never going to get all your data. You're not going to hear about a breach where all your data got stolen. The other thing is I can't go in and modify your data. It's using blockchain-like technology, which uses something called consensus, which basically means all the nodes in the network have to agree to changes before the changes happen. It's not centralized the way it is right now. So, the days where somebody can just go in and corrupt your data, delete your data are gone. You don't have those reliability risks.
So,
Who's your main competitor?
Our main competitor. Our main competitors right now would be the cloud computing database platforms from Microsoft, AWS, IBM's got a few, and there's some efforts also in the blockchain community to build something like this.
So how does it work? Your co-founder Pavel was in Gothenburg last year. He kind of communicated a little bit like this in Gothenburg. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Gothenburg seems to have a strong blockchain community, maybe even stronger than in Stockholm. Mm-hmm. So they invited you back there, invited you guys, Guzel, back there on Tuesday. So what do you do with these developers? What are they signing up for the service already? How does it work?
So really right now we've already started development of this. It's not just a white paper.
So what is the white paper, first of all?
So most token generating / ICOs that you'll notice out there are backed by a white paper, and it's a little bit of the Wild West, so definitely it's very important to not only read the white paper, but understand who's behind it and make sure that there actually is a service behind it. So what we've done is we've actually written a very deep white paper, and it's available to the public. You can read about it. It's available in 3 different forms. One of them is more business side, and then another one is a very deep dive into the technical side. So it really explains all the technology we're doing. And in terms of developers, what we're really doing right now is we're getting them engaged to start using the simulator that we've already built, and they can see the technology and the concepts, because there's several different concepts we're using with decentralized databases, which are new, and we want to demonstrate that to the community. So developers can immediately get that code, download it immediately, it's publicly available, and play around with that, see how it's progressing from week to week. The other thing we're doing is we're also going to be giving them our API so they can, they can start actually integrating applications they have in with the database technology that we're building.
Okay. So you have the white paper. How long is the white paper?
The longest version is 120 pages.
That's a lot to read.
Yes, that's why we have the 40-page version.
We have the 40 pages to start with, and then 120.
If you're interested in reading more after the 40 pages, you can get the bigger one.
Right. So what should actually investors, from your entrepreneurial point of view, look after not to get burned?
They should really, first thing they should do is make sure that in the country they're in, they're actually allowed to even get involved with a TGE. In some cases, it might be more challenging. I'm not a legal expert. But I would say that, find out more about the founding team, find out about what kind of developers they have, definitely read the white paper, find out what kind of collaborations they have with other companies. And, I think one of the most important things is just look and see, are they actually building anything, or is it just talk? I've invested in some ICOs, and the ones I tend to invest in really are the ones that have something already going. They've built something, or they've got some sort of background where they've built something else that's complementary. In our case with Buza, we've built enterprise products in Singapore and in Southeast Asia, and in some cases, these products will be some of the first applications using the technology we're building.
Frank, if you put your, thank you very much, Niraj. Frank, if you put your investor hat, let's get some numbers just before you kick off. So what are the numbers? So far this year, almost $2 billion have been raised in various ICOs. $800 million in the last 7 weeks. I think Filecoin was the highest score of $252 million, I think. And that is including $52 million of accredited investors, and the rest was actually not accredited investors. So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's way more than in '99.
It's exceeding venture capital.
It's exceeding venture capital. By how much?
I don't know. You probably know.
Yeah, I think it's
right there.
I think it's just about exceeding.
Yeah.
But when we say exceeding venture capital investing in blockchain, right? Not exceeding venture capital as an industry.
True.
So it's a little bit the reason maybe why. So what was the reason from your point of view, an investor point of view, why did these ICOs actually start at all?
I guess the first one was the Ethereum one, which was in 2015. So they were the kickstart of the counter movement to what Bitcoin was, super dominant. Yeah. And they created this smart contract platform, and they were the first ICO, and they raised it. I don't know how much money they raised. I don't recall.
18 million.
18 million, right? So it was still relatively
peanuts
small.
compared to this. But in those days, it was wow, right?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, so since then,
what is the market cap now of the
Ethereum is now $30+ billion dollars, right? So if you were part of the ICO, you could have bought. I think one Bitcoin was like 2,000 ethers, right? So you'd definitely be a millionaire by now. And that is just 2 years of holding the coin. And that's the interesting thing. All of those people, not all, but many of those that held on to those Ethereums and liquidity pouring into the market now have the funds to start investing. And that's why the ICO craze is happening, because for them it's token money. Like, I include myself in that, right?
Easy come, easy go, kind of.
Easy come, easy go. Yeah. And that's fine, because it sparks this whole ecosystem. And people who've been around long enough.
It sounds very speculative, though.
A lot of it is speculative. And
so what should be your investors? Well, what are you? I mean, that was his.
Well, he said a lot of
pretty good advice, but you are the real investor putting in this. What are you looking after?
I don't know how much he's putting in, so you can never compare. That's the first rule of Crypto Club and the second rule of Crypto Club. You don't say.
Yeah. What are you looking after? What are you looking after?
The same thing. You know, it's a lot of them don't have token utility. So I think it's
So what is token utility? I mean, we got that example from Mirage, but what does token utility
so
mean?
to give an example why Ethereum took off the way it did was they created the Ethereum platform allowing people to create ERC20 tokens on the back of it. So basically people started creating tokens around it that still needed the Ethereum token to transact with. So suddenly you have a network effect taking shape. So you're able to invest in a network. Right, so once you start investing in a network, you can see a potential multiple that's much higher than if you're investing in a traditional type of profit sharing IPO. So the network effect that you have
is important.
That's a big factor. Yeah. So for instance, another identity play that I like for that reason was Civic. They have a limited amount of supply. They started with quite small amount that they raised. And then you could invest in a network of people having to verify with the Civic token. So there needs to be utility. Another one is...
But isn't utility like what every investor looks like, that they're actually solving a problem?
It's not only solving a problem, it's also actually looking at whether the token is used in the actual network activity. And many don't. Like there's many that have just a profit scheme. And I think we're looking at two categories of tokens now emerging. One is those that do have a network effect and token utility. And I think what will emerge pretty soon is a securitized token. So it's effectively you're going to do an accelerated IPO. And there's a company looking in the United States of doing that. It's called Polymath. That are looking at how can you take a token and do it in a securitized way. Because the SEC in the United States, talking about legal, they just came with guidelines that states that if it doesn't pass the Howey test, then it can be viewed as a security, and then it should be treated as a security, and then you're liable for issuing the token, trading a token as a security.
So the Wild West is getting a little bit regulated?
It's getting regulated. So those were clear guidelines, and then Canada followed with guidelines. Now
Singapore did as well.
So Singapore is maybe more on the forefront of actually trying to regulate it. So they might be the first one that actually regulated it. So it's a move. And in Russia, I think they're also looking at regulating ICOs.
I feel that Marcus wants to say something. Please.
Yes, go ahead.
I think the term regulators maybe. I think they say, as long as you move and operate in a regulated environment, there exists.
Okay.
So there's no regulation necessary. Just be either black or white.
So they haven't.
Don't be gray.
Okay. So they haven't expressed.
They won't change regulation. They're just going to say, just please either get a CMS license, RFMC license, capital markets license, to do it or don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's not going to a new regulation coming up to say fit into the existing one or just don't do it.
Okay. Fair enough.
So Frank, you're looking at the network effect, utility of it. What else do you look at?
So team, right?
Team.
So there's.
How do you check teams?
So you look at what they've done before, like the same thing Mirage has.
Yeah.
So Mirage, no, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. You look at what they've done before, whether in the traditional world or in the crypto world. If it's in the crypto world, like if Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, puts his name behind it, you're sure that it's going to take off. So it also depends what you're looking at. You're looking at it purely from an investment point of view, and if that's going to do a multiple within a very short period of time, and then sell it off. Or you're looking at a long-term holding, or maybe using the token for your own business. There's different investment profiles that you're going to approach this token at. But if you're looking for, okay, will this token fly? Then having the right advisors on board, like a Vitalik, having the right developers on board on the team side matter. So you look at traditional experience and you look at crypto experience. And it's interesting because some have the traditional experience, but they don't understand the crypto world. So from crypto investors looking at this from the outside world, it's like, okay, these are just a bunch of finance guys that are trying to, capitalize on this token hype. And typically they are. So that if you don't have the crypto expertise, a lot of people will write it off. So that's important. And the other way around, if people can't show the product and they're just a bunch of crypto and it's just paperware, it's sometimes hard to see. So, but the good thing is the good ICOs, they have communication channels, they're communicating.
What are the communication channels?
Typically Telegram, Slack, Bitcoin Talk, Reddit, and what is very important is also to look at the GitHub. So the open source project will put their code up on the
and then it kind of gets vetted there. You kind of see the conversation.
Anyone can look at the code base.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say Slack's not secure, is it?
Slack is not secure. So when there's a Slack community, which is now, it's a problem, there's a lot of phishing attempts, and they're getting really sophisticated. So it was,
Please go ahead.
So if you've got a standards-based peer-to-peer secure encrypted social private network with an IoT gateway
right
built in, what do you do?
Sorry, but that was a specific question.
So we have an architecture.
You want to create a secure
We
architecture
have
for
it.
that communication.
We have it.
There's a need for a Slack that is more secure
We've
for
done
open
it.
communities.
We have it.
You should launch an ICO and make
Right,
that work.
okay. It's standards based.
Okay. So
What was the name of your company so you get a little bit of exposure?
Exposure.
Little Sister is the product.
Little Sister is the
Little
product.
Sister.
Okay, we'll have it on the radar.
It is.
I have an answer for you. IRC with private keys. It's an ancient protocol that still works for that.
All right. So multiple solutions there. New company.
We're
old
based
company.
on
And then
XMPP.
you can judge between the two. You
Yes.
talked about the network effect, and that's important. I want to switch to Dirk. You have a company that actually relies a little bit on network effect. What are your plans for the ICO? Can you go a little bit in detail? What is the utility again? What is the real utility of this?
Yeah, so as we currently operate the platform, it's live, and it means that it also has already an in-game economy using virtual coins. They are not crypto tokens so far. It's like a free-to-play monetization model. And obviously, we currently operate and offer the content. And what we are going to do with the ICO and the tokenizing the platform means that we are introducing our tokens that will, on the one hand, have different functionalities within our platform, so it can be used directly either to really exchange it into coins, but the most important thing is that we will open up the platform to give our users in the first step the chance to produce their own content, produce their own contests against each other, and use the tokens they can set the parameters like. I want to have a contest with only my buddies or with a number of people with the German Bundesliga, and then they can use the content, the new tokens to set sort of an entry fee and to also to set a winning criteria for the other users who participate. What we are going to do is then helping them to grow or to have visibility within the platform for their own challenges and reward them back with tokens so that we create a self-driving mechanism that users are incentivized to create engagement of other users because they use, we open up the platform for them, they can create their own challenges, and the more other users they are engaging, the more tokens they get rewarded with. So that means they help us to grow the community because the main, obviously, instead of the main goal is to have a chance that the value of our tokens is increasing on the secondary platforms, and this is based on increasing demand. So we need to roll out the product. We want to have the community growing, and we do that by open it up so that the more our users are contributing to the growth of our community, the more they are being rewarded. So they have a chance really to gain tokens by being very active in helping us to grow the community. And then in the second step, we want to really have our tokens to be the sports fan token. That means also externally that, for example, if we partner up with Bundesliga clubs, so we want to convince them that they accept the token as well for certain money can buy items, for example, for certain areas of their online shop. Or also then other fantasy sports platforms could use the token. So it's all about the fan engagement and that you get, as a fan, have a chance to really use our token in the first step within our own platform because it's already there and active. And in the second step, and also that external fan shops or I don't know, even bars or whatever can accept the tokens because it's all kind of connected to the football fan, where they can get rewarded. This provides then demand and liquidity.
Marcus,
Yeah.
I am biased. Can you tear him apart in terms of what he's trying to do as opposed to me? What questions do you have directly as an Austrian against a German?
Did you say you were German?
I'm German.
Oh, sorry,
German.
I tried one.
I think, yeah, I won't have. I mean, I want to take your part right now. No, so I leave that to later for beer. But no, I think what happened to us on our side the last 2 years, we were approached by dozens of fintech companies, startups doing something blockchain, raising funds from us as an investor, and we declined almost all of them. And now I see many of them doing ICO. So I think to your point, you see companies doing something like just raising funds, and then you have more coming up with securitization bits of pieces. Right? We looked at most of the companies right now in Singapore that are doing ICOs, and 10x, for example, we did $87 million ICO. We looked at the company from an investor point of view to invest real cash into the company. We declined it because it just didn't make sense. Does it make sense now to do an ICO, and does it make sense now they raise funds and $87 million to produce and build a product they're doing right now? I doubt it. So I think we wouldn't have invested in the team, the product back then. There's typical reasons for an investor not to invest, maybe too early.
And now they're seeing the ICO as an alternative funding source. I find it very difficult to understand.
So you're killing the whole idea, actually. Not just these two companies. I love it.
I think
Yeah.
I think that it's very premature.
Yeah.
I think if you
Why?
I think that the products that are being built on the ICO market in the crypto economic model, most of them have probably very tough time to actually get real world customers.
Yeah.
Looking at, again, a few companies out there in Singapore, globally actually, it's a very small community. It's getting bigger and bigger now, though, that maybe millions of people that are looking into buying these tokens for these products because they want to believe there's going to be mass adoption coming up. I just doubted that anyone globally, including my mom and my sister, my brother, they won't even bother about a Bitcoin credit card, to be honest. Right? So I think my gut feeling is it's just too early. If you couple 1999 tech bubble with blockchain hype, you have ICO hype. Right? So it's just kind of doubled up. However, I do think there is a route for a very interesting.
So you're going to come in and consolidate everything, aren't you?
No, I think that's way too early for that. But I just feel that what's happening on the product.
But is it worse than 99, or what does it look like?
I was too young to actually to tell.
Somebody said 1.7 trillion was the peak of the bubble in 99, and we're now at 150 billion of crypto, so it could still go 10 times before it's equal.
Oh, so it's still not in terms of real market cap, right? Okay.
But when I follow the product, I mean, if I follow the ones that are ICO in Singapore and looking at how they actually build the product, many are struggling a lot. Right? And many are behind the schedules, many are behind to deliver actually the product, to ship, and so. No, let's see what happens.
But isn't it really? But isn't it like a gigantic Kickstarter where you have actually secondary, secondary liquidity? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, you liquidity for the building product into actually.
But if we talk about Kickstarter, I mean, everybody knows what Kickstarter is here. I would guess, right? Right? Hands up for who knows what Kickstarter is.
Yeah,
almost everybody. Okay. So it's a prepayment, right, for something that you want.
Well, yeah.
Doesn't that make sense?
It gives you access. It gives you access
if I can be pro and you against for a while. So,
I'm against.
Yeah, you're against. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's a huge Kickstarter. I mean, these guys, are getting loads of network effect. He wants his Oracle database up there. Loads of developers. Friday after here, it's going to sign up for the service. And it's a huge, prepayment. And once it's up and running, they can use the service.
I would love to see the stats of the investors who actually want to see the product, they want to use it, as Kickstarter style, versus Chinese who want to get the Bitcoin out of the country. Right? So I think, to your point, why ICO happened so quickly last few years, also there's been just a lot of mining power happening in China with Bitcoins. So where does the money go? To ICOs right now. So I want to really see, if you're under Kickstarter, I really want the product. I think everyone doing Kickstarter wants the product.
Yeah.
ICO, I think it's a tiny fraction of people actually doing ICO want the product. Yeah.
Like nobody.
Yeah, I think.
But aren't those the winners?
We have a product already.
Yeah. So
but Marcus, aren't those the winners?
Well, for what? I mean, if you have to
those
separate. There's a Chinese investor, there is just an investor, and there's product lovers. Product lovers, they're going to win. The ones who just want to invest right now and hold it on until the lockup period is over, so you're going to invest 6-8 weeks and the token can trade, you can make a lot of money. The Chinese ones don't really care. So I think there's 3 different parties right now I can see doing ICOs, or investing in ICOs. And
so what's happening in China? Why is it so extraordinary? What are the Chinese grandmothers up to now?
The grandma?
Yeah.
Well, they throw Bitcoin parties. So if you go to Shanghai, Pudong, you literally, or even Wall Street in New York, Tupperware parties are turning now to Bitcoin parties. So I'm not even kidding. Yeah, and you see, they come together, you have a bit of a Chinese tea, and then you just invest in Bitcoin. You sign up, and you have WeChat groups where people are disappearing who run these groups in China because they have been advising on ICOs and have been just communicating through WeChat into what's there of China.
But surely when you have these Ponzi schemes, which is the right name for it, I mean, the Chinese regulator is not that happy when it gets too.
They don't like it. No.
They like it?
They don't like it.
They don't like it. So what's going to happen?
Well, the question really is, I think, how the Bitcoin farms, like Bobby, how he's going to react to this. Bobby Lee, who runs Bitcoin China. I'm very curious to see how the Bitcoin, because everything else, I mean, Ethereum, any ICO is still based on the Bitcoin blockchain, so we shouldn't forget that Bitcoin plays a very important part of it. Hello. And I think they're going to see how they're going to still have Bitcoin connected to the global blockchain world, and how the Chinese government is going to regulate, I think, the Bitcoin infrastructure.
So if you want to play safe, I mean, from your point of view, same question I'd ask for Frank. I mean, if you were to at all look into one single project, what would you be looking at?
I would look into what license do I need. That's a Singapore capital market license.
Yeah.
and because regulated, it's white space. And how can you do against that an ICO? So to your second point of securitization, I think it's very interesting to move alongside the existing frameworks. How can you raise funds, let's say fiat versus ICO, maybe together into a project? Yeah. But look at rather from an investment point of view into regulated entities.
So what about Singapore there from your point of view? Why is Singapore actually at the forefront here in terms of welcoming companies, certain companies that are doing ICOs?
I think Singapore has been doing a very good job the last 3 years to position themselves as a technology and fintech hub. It's a natural development. Fintech is moving into ICO now, and so I think it's just the next step of this development. It's been very accessible. You can reach the regulator via WhatsApp. So I think it's very unique. You can be really open conversation with them, and they're going to help you to understand the framework very easily. It's also just a hub for ASEAN. As I said before, I think people are coming there, talent coming there, and they do have good marketing people.
Okay. From an entrepreneur's point of view, why did you choose to do an ICO in Singapore?
That's a great question, Dushan. So, first of all, we chose Singapore just because we had access to the large ASEAN market, which trumps anything we have access to from Canada. So that was one of the reasons we moved there. But actually, we're really...
So you were already there before you decided to do an ICO?
Yeah, we just happened to be in the right place.
Yeah.
And we actually noticed that there were already some token-generating events, ICOs, happening in Singapore. The fact that MES came out already and made a statement about it, and my interpretation of it really is, we're just advising you that do your due diligence if you're wanting to invest in these, as opposed to we're going to stop you from it. We actually appreciate that because they're not saying no to it; they're just saying do your own due diligence. And so we feel it's the right framework for us to do it. An ICO in Singapore, and Luzelle, we have a great relationship with MES already. We've, like I said, we've already done several projects that went through MES, and we've been accredited. So we definitely feel we have a major advantage in, establishing ourselves there to do our ICO for our database.
Frank, your question will be maybe different, but you've been to Singapore twice. Why did you go twice there? What do you feel is attractive about Singapore? In this kind of blockchain ICO world?
I didn't go there for blockchain at the time, but it was in your positioning that we were looking at working with Singtel and obviously the whole space in Singapore is inside because of the climate. And what was interesting there was to go to be able to work with the regulators in a way where you get things quicker done.
And doesn't have to be an ICO; could be any kind of fintech.
I would say that for any type of technology company, it's a lot more accommodating. I would say than in Europe in general. In terms of ICO, I mean there are two hubs in the world. Two hubs in the world really. It's Switzerland, Zurich, Zug, where all the ICOs are being launched out of. And the other one is Singapore. Now with the guidelines of the Singaporean government, I don't know if Switzerland will take the lead. However, with the SEC ruling of the guidelines, the overall fear in the market has set a little bit in, because even if you're doing a foundation out of Switzerland where you're still offering to US customers, you might still be viewed as a security and you might still deal with the US regulators. So some of the legal advice that some of the ICOs have followed in the past might not actually play out that nicely, which is why there's a need for securitized tokens. Anyway, Singapore, they together with Zug are leading the pack. So,
what about you, Dirk? Why Singapore in general, and why are you planning to do an ICO there?
Yeah, so as Frank said, there are only the two hubs where, when you look at if you want to do the ICO, it's in a regulated environment.
So Switzerland is closer, right?
Yeah, obviously. I've been to Zug, and also I met the lawyers there and some people in that space. But for us, it's as a combination of that's really being exposed to the Asian market from Singapore. I think that because that's more interesting for our business, and instead of having a close regional connection to Switzerland. But for us, I think the combination of that we have a strong focus on Asia as a market for our business. There's a strong appetite for ICOs in the next step, and I think that we have a better chance to really do a successful ICO from Singapore because we have a lot of good arguments that our business is going to grow in Asia as well, and rather as opposed to doing it in Switzerland because of regional.
Great. So let's open up a little bit for questions. We've been going back and forth here now for a good 40 minutes. So please, raise your hand, stand up, say a little bit who you are, and please do ask a question to anyone. Please go ahead. Yeah, just who you are.
Should I do the icebreaker question?
Yeah, please.
Mike from the Stockholm School of Economics, research on fintech. I think it's a question to Nira at the current stage. So on one side, when you say the MAS is not really supporting you, but they check you. On the other hand, you have the European authorities, where we will launch a new regulation called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, in May 2018 now. And it says that there's a right to be forgotten. So I can reach out as a customer, and then you have to erase all of my data. And of course, when we review how blockchain is being structured, it's like an Excel file where everybody can type stuff, but you can't really erase anything. What is your reply to this type of regulation? Is it that the regulator is pulling you back and you will have to cancel your European side of the business? Or it's maybe a more general question, so GDPR and blockchain.
Is this related to the database product?
It's related to the database because it's divided on blockchain technology in different places.
That's a great question. It actually, one of the things I wasn't able to get into detail about is our database product is not, it's using blockchain technology, but it's not a blockchain. So what that means is the data on it isn't, it's not recorded forever, because we basically need to keep this database running for the long term. Blockchains technically grow without bounds, and as you probably know about the existing blockchain, it's huge. So the short answer is our database product can actually parameterize. You can control how long the data lives, and at some point it'll get purged. So as in terms of, I believe what you're talking about, you have the control as the developer storing the data there to control how long the data is there, and then it can be removed at some point. So it is using blockchain technology, but it doesn't stay forever. It is erasable and therefore mutable.
Okay.
Anyone else, please? Go ahead, just tell who you are quickly.
Dimitri, a software developer. I have a question to Frank, but maybe to us also. If you know a story, a couple of centuries ago, people invested like crazy into tulip flowers. And right now they invested into bitcoins, cryptocurrency. So will history repeat itself?
I think it's more analogous to the .com area. There was a bubble, it bursted, but then you also had Google, Facebook, and all these companies emerging from it. So I think the devil is in the details with all these ICOs, like we just discussed. You need to look at every single one of them individually and look behind every single one about the token utility, the team, etc. All these parameters by which you can judge any company and also an ICO. And some of them will be the future behemoths, now are Google and Facebook.
But if it's crushed, at least with flowers, I have nice flower. What I will have with coins.
Sure.
we need to put some kind of physical thing to the picture.
So what did you have when the .com bubble bursted?
Well, at that time I didn't have anything.
Right, you had a stock maybe in a company, right? And that company might have been Google, right? And that company then became much bigger later on, so it's the same. So it's the same. The difference is that with tokens, if you have the right ones, I think you, instead of a token that represents a share in a company, it's a token that represents a share in a network, which is potentially much larger. And we can talk about monetary policy again, how I believe that it's going to go all transition from A to B, by which the value representative in this token market should be a lot higher than you could think of if you look at the stock market, because it's not a company, it's a network, or it's a currency, which is valued in a different way, which is why some of the multiples on it are out of sync as well. But arguably, we're in an ICO bubble right now.
What is the market cap of Bitcoin right now?
70 or so.
70 billion. Okay. Any other question? Please go ahead.
I make maybe one more point on Singapore, because we've been promoting this country a lot on stage, even though I love it and I like to be there anymore in the next few years anyway. But I think Singapore's success really relates also to the success of the ASEAN around. So I think we have to be very mindful that come to Singapore doesn't mean you're going to be like entering ASEAN within one go. I think we have to be very careful and pick the right partners in the right countries if you're going to Singapore. So let's say you go to Singapore and you have your HQ there for Asia, but then take Vietnam, take Philippines, take Indonesia, as you said earlier, and you find the right partners. I think Singapore's success in the last 40, 50 years has been really being depending on ASEAN growth story. And I think even fintech now is the same. I'm sorry again.
Which are the hottest
So I think it really depends what you want to do. I think
So,
if you payments, it's Indonesia right now.
Yeah.
But this is already, I think, been done that. I mean, the Chinese are coming in, the Tencent, Alibaba, paying big checks for payments in Indonesia. I think I like more the lending piece, not necessarily the peer-to-peer lending. I rather like the credit story of things, invoice financing, supply chain financing, large ASEAN credit, MBFs are taking off the books from banks. I think there's a big piece happening there. And then simple things like debt collection, payroll, yeah? All these like really simple things where you have, as I said earlier, things on paper right now moving to the cloud.
But payments is a big thing, right? Across.
It's across. I mean, Singapore is doing a lot now with Pay Now. I think there's a Swedish equivalent to this. They're doing a bit more. You have Alipay and Tencent and GrabPay and Gojek Pay, all the different kind of pays in Indonesia. So big, I think, piece happening there. Malaysia is somehow a bit behind. They have their own internal issues right now. Philippines I'm very bullish about. And then it's Thailand. I think Thailand has also a very open regulator. Bank of Thailand is doing a lot with Singapore government. So I think there's going to be more cross-pollination happening between these two countries. So yeah, again, I think come to Singapore is one first step, but find the right families, the right conglomerates, find the right partners to really move them to the deep need of the countries. And that's a bit of a longer piece. That doesn't happen overnight. Yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Please go ahead. Tell me who you are.
Okay, hi. I'm actually from Taiwan, so I'm from the region. I just want to ask, like, what kind of comment you have on the regulation side, because there were so many pace, just these 2 years, but then lately, Chinese government just decided, okay, they're gonna tighten up the regulation. And do you see similar trend going on for maybe ICO in a few years, because there are so many people participating and they just use Alipay and then WeChat, just QQ to invest in ICO. It's like a huge user base. It can be also really regulated. So how do you think about that?
I'm going to comment on that a little bit. I'm probably not the best person to answer it, but I have some thoughts about that. I mean, politically, I'm a libertarian. I'm really kind of opposed to governmental intervention in anything, really. I'm kind of a minimalist. But on the same token, I do believe that decentralization possesses a threat to government. Ultimately, monetary policy, anything, is one of the means by which government can control and manage the population and ensure that things go the way they want. So I definitely see that ICOs and this whole decentralization direction is a threat to governments, and you're going to see, and you're already seeing, that they're going to come in and add regulation, possibly for the right reasons, but also possibly for the wrong reasons, just to ensure that they still have a bargaining chip in the future.
So kind of what we've been thinking before, it's kind of vertical thinking, right? The pound, the SEK, the Singapore dollar, the Hong Kong dollar, the US dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So population of 9 million has one currency.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Singapore, 5.5 million has their own currency.
Yes.
Here we have this horizontal global currencies, right?
Yeah, and there's a certain degree of anonymity. They can't, taxation, regulation, all those things are going to become much more difficult. So definitely, ultimately, they're going to be adding regulation. So I definitely see that's going to be coming to ensure that, they can do what they're doing, continue status quo. Governments generally, I don't think they're very necessarily receptive to these sorts of things. One of the things I wanted to add about Singapore that I really like is it's a city-state. And, having been in Canada and dealing with the government at the municipal level, at some level, provincial, state level, and federal, there's a certain level of red tape and delays you have to go through in order to get things to go through. With Singapore, we're dealing with MES, we're dealing with the government, one level. Things are very streamlined, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about doing things there. Is we've been able to, move forward in 18 months far faster than we would have been able to in 5 years if we were in Canada. So,
Maybe to your question quickly, I believe that the current frameworks by regulators are actually very sophisticated. They've done a very good job the last decades to build up a framework that makes sense. So I don't think there will be much more added so far, but if you take financial advice is a regulated system. Financial advice, you have to have a license. So that's why Chinese government are clamping down on all these WeChat forums. So I think some governments are clamping down on all these Telegram and WhatsApp forums because it's financial advice. So that's outside you don't have a license to do financial advice on ICOs, you've got to be shut down. So I think that you already have a good framework in place that regulates most of the activities. Right now, all of it is happening all over the place. But I do think that governments are starting to say, so what is a license? The number license, okay, you're white space, you're black space, you're out. Right?
One last question, and then we'll try to get Singapore back. Sorry.
Quick
please.
question about
One more area.
infrastructure. There's a big variety of levels of infrastructure penetration. How do people get on the internet? And I think, you know, the growth of like Facebook and Google corresponded to the spreading of internet access and the cost of internet access. But when you talk about some of the economies you've mentioned, there's a huge disparity. Obviously Singapore, very advanced, Taiwan, but when you get to other countries, the actual infrastructure, is it there to support this use of internet technology?
So the good number is that 3.2 million people being added a month. 3.2 million people added a month in ASEAN to internet. So I would invest not in ISO and Western Telecom Towers in Myanmar. Right? That is the best investment you can do right now.
Telenor's biggest market is Myanmar.
So that's another point. I think this conversation is very, very kind of first world problem type conversation. There will be leapfrogging, there will be things happening, but there is so much more happening in Myanmar, Vietnam, Thailand on the infrastructure side, from giving out wallets, giving out credit cards, giving out smartphones. I think there's a big piece that has to happen first, then we can talk about this here. Yeah.
Some of the, I have an Indian origin. I go to India a lot, and Guzel has engaged in payment technology in India. And one of the interesting things that might be obvious to people is some of these third world countries, second world countries, they didn't really invest in the technological advances that we had in the West in the 80s, like credit cards, debit cards, all that. They actually were stuck with cash. And now all of a sudden, for example, you look at India with the demonetization about 6 months ago, they've actually leapfrogged what we have in North America and even in Europe, because they've actually gone past credit cards and they're going straight to e-wallets. In India now, you can go and buy vegetables from someone, use a QR code and pay them digitally. You can pay for your rickshaw. I can't do that in Los Angeles or Vancouver. I still have to use cash or credit cards. So you're actually seeing in a lot of cases that these guys are actually jumping past the infrastructure that we, take for granted.
And just to echo that, I'm going straight to Singapore, then to Hyderabad in India, and doing my first deal there. I really believe that India is extremely exciting, just because that government policy that they did 6 months ago, and every single country in Southeast Asia is not just checking how they did that. And I think, I was in Casablanca 2 days ago. It's not the same thing. Just to kind of give you two extremes. So I definitely believe that you have a competitive advantage of being in Singapore with the Indian link. Even the monitors authorities talk to each other between Singapore and India. There is a real linkage there in terms of what we're doing, in terms of hubs and community on the WhatsApp and WeChat. We communicate and talk to those people. So I think you should also consider Singapore not only for Southeast Asia but India, and that's actually what I do with my companies especially. So one last question from Annette.
Well, it was the technical lead thing that I had in mind. One of the investments that I have is currently working with Bangkok Bank through a accelerator, which is a major opportunity, but it's the technical lead thing that is proven. We also sit here at the FinTech Hub and we see busloads of companies coming in and countries that are coming in on a trip and see why is the cashless society function in Sweden works. But one of the things that I believe in Thailand now during the summer and working on this project is that we have also a transparency in our society, so we actually trust our society and our government. And that's a good thing or a bad thing for us in Sweden. Is actually a good thing, because we don't have crazy governmenting, which is happening in the other parts of the world. So it's more of like, what is the next step? If I then want to enter Asia, now I know how to get into the countries, but I guess for the group that is visiting here, what is the best thing do you believe to be in starting in Singapore for a company, and then finding the right collaborators? Calling the embassy or going into the hub, to the accelerators? I mean, we did our...
For an entrepreneur or for an investor?
No, for a company or for anyone.
For entrepreneur.
I'm driving my investments into something that they don't really want to do.
Yeah.
But obviously, here we are, and it's going really well. So
I think it's a combination. You talk to the embassy, to Emil, to Håkan, and actually Singapore itself is highly networked. We have this thing that if you lose your job, we have 90. If you're especially not Singaporean, but that's actually 1.5 million of the population. You have 90 days to find another job. So basically, your social insurance is your network. So instead of sitting on Arbetsförmedlingen and waiting for that, people are spending their time and efforts on actually networking. So it's a highly, highly networked society because everybody depends on everybody. Because then the 90 days comes in, you need to find another job. And actually most people do because they are highly networked. So I think, there is a general network effect which is tremendous in Singapore. You have English language, which is the language everybody speaks. That's what a kind of Landsfaden said. And that worked like the Nucleus sport. And it's a soft landing to Asia. So I think, you have something really, really unique there to enter very, very quickly. I think, what the other thing that I love about Singapore is that you get your cultural training every single day. You have a Singaporean Chinese to talk to convince, then a Singapore Indian, then a Singapore Malay, then you have an American, then you have an Australian, then you have a Swede, then you have a French guy, and so on. And you have to sell to all these people. And once you have actually been able on the B2B level to sell to all these people and think about their cultural effect, you can actually build a global company, on the B2B level at least, not on the B2C maybe. So maybe that is about it because we want to get in Singapore back. So a big applause to the 4 panelists. Okay, fine. We gave it a try.
We did. So unfortunately, Singapore's computer, the webcam has crashed the OS or something, I'm not sure. But we're not going to try again because it's really embarrassing. So, Emil,
yeah,
round up.
I think just to continue a bit on the topic on Singapore and why Singapore. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we started to try to position and market Sweden and fintech in Southeast Asia and Singapore. And as you said, there are busloads of not only Singaporean but other countries coming to understand the advantages and the cashless journey and other parts of fintech development in Sweden, and goes very far back to the 60s and with OM and with the bank cards and the unique bank collaboration and the entire consensus culture that we have. The government has also given Business Sweden a task to work with tech startup or scale up, so we actually fund companies who want to sit in an incubator in Singapore or in Southeast Asia. We are doing that with 3 companies so far. It's been very difficult to find companies that are interested to go to Southeast Asia. And that's the reason for now, for the 3rd time, that we are arranging a delegation trip and led by Official Sweden and the government offices of Sweden. Last year we were fortunate to have Minister Per Bolund leading a company delegation of 15 people. And in certain of those countries, government-to-government relations are quite important to open certain doors. Maybe less so, I would say, within certain spaces of the fintech and innovation landscape, but more in the business landscape. Because when we go to the fintech innovation tech centers in Singapore, they open the doors, they're very keen to talk. But when you go to the business side, that Stan Chartered or Citi or HSBC, the door tends to be a little bit more closed now. And a lot of the companies that we work with, they're already a bit commercial. So they have a product, they have proven somewhere, and they are selling, so to say, in that sense. So we will do that in November again, and we haven't chosen Indonesia or Philippines or Vietnam and Thailand this time. But we have chosen Malaysia. And just a few days ago, we were fortunate to meet with the governor of the central bank in KL. And I understood, Carl, that it was really Sweden who was the benchmark. And
yeah,
they are keen to sit and talk. And, Malaysia and Singapore is a very special interlinked, merged economy and also a complicated relationship. But in the end, it's a very friendly relationship. And keep in mind that Malaysia, how many people are living there?
30 million.
30 million. And strong consumer-driven economy, a lot of regional banks now.
Yeah, regional banks, Maybank, OCBC, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
CIMB as well. Yeah. So honestly, if you look at the Singaporean banks, which are 3, they are quite domestic. There are some exceptions. But the Malaysian banks and the Indonesian banks, I feel, could be the big time, honestly, than the local Singaporean banks in that sense. So we are going up a few days to Malaysia, a few days to Singapore, put the Sweden flag again there, but we can't only do it with the government. We also need some companies and some content. And I think, as Dusan and Marcus said, you need to find the right partners. And we have built up an ecosystem, we are able to find the and India as well, which you write for the tomorrow. We also have initiatives, and I think Marisa, you know more about China and Hong Kong as well, which I'm not working so much for the last 10 years, but also initiatives going on in that part of the world. Small Swedish base with Bima Millvik in Singapore. We have also funded by me in crowdfunding in Malaysia primarily. And which others? Collectus is a Swedish, taking the debt collection business to Singapore, run by Gustav Eriksson. And a few others. I believe Seamless, at least parts of Seamless have been operating there. And there are other Swedish companies that I don't know if you want to be mentioned, but they are here today and have initiated business dialogues in Singapore and entering Southeast Asia. So definitely a window for opportunity, but I think we need to put on the flag more, because the ambassador and me, you know, we don't know so much about what you have been talking to today, and we don't really have the content. We can only facilitate, create dialogues, and create a platform for you to approach partners, decision makers, and clients. But we really need some companies there, and also commitment, of course, from the government. Is there something else before we hand over to the ambassador who will close, or any questions you might have? I guess we will have some coffee.
We will. We've got one. He said he's mended it, so we're going to have one more go.
All right.
All right. Let's try it.
I read somewhere that Singapore was #1 in ICT maturity.
I'm going to try this once. So. Can you hear us? No sound. Okay, we'll go to the ambassador to finish off, and I'll just kill this one now. It wasn't meant to be, was it?
But remember that Singapore is a great place, as we have heard, to find funding and to find talents. Market access is also good, but it's access. The market is elsewhere, and therefore we believe it's important to build up the ecosystem in the further region, so to say. But we still feel that the platform needs to be built and tested before commercialized from our business leaders.
Good.
Great.
Thank you. Paul Cannell, give us his thoughts.
Thank you so much. Extremely interesting discussions, and as Emil said, some of the words used here today is a bit of, well, I didn't get everything, I must admit. But
neither do we know. Understand what we do. So.
That's very good.
Let's be honest.
But I think that some comments here, a little bit, of course, boost sort of promoting Singapore even more. Just the other day, Prime Minister of Singapore, PM Lee, said on Twitter, you know, we need an e-payment system that is valid for everyone, and immediately, you know, the fintech industry responded. And I think, yes, to have that as a news, that what the Prime Minister tweets, it shows a massive interest for this line of business. And MIS and Sopnendo and Ravi Menon, who's leading the Monetary Authority, is really pushing the agenda. So I think that there are so many good opportunities if you can hook on to this and be part of it. And in this regard, we should also mention one very important player here, and that's EDB, Economic Development Board, who's represented here today, Edmund. EDB really scans globally for interesting opportunities and gives support in coming to Singapore and do business in Singapore. Any short introduction from your side of what you do? Or?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Pleased to just make an introduction. I'm representing the Economic Development Board of Singapore. We are an economic development agency. So we're very similar to Business Sweden in purpose. And I would say that I think today you've heard very much about the MAS who regulates the finance industry. The EDB takes care of almost everything else, from engineering services to R&D to manufacturing. We cover these sectors. But that being said, of course, the Singapore government, we'd like to be more and more united and whole of government as well. And so definitely I'm supporting the MAS in terms of having conversations with all of you in your interest to Singapore as well. I am not a finance industry expert, so please forgive me. I will do my best to learn as much as I can and have a very fruitful conversation with all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. One should also mention that Singapore is what it is today due to extreme openness, being friend to everyone, and is many times called the most connected country in the world. And when I say that, I mean to looking into what kind of different trade agreements with others. And this is a jungle as such, but I think it's you probably will have much better opportunities of entering all the neighboring countries with already existing agreements from Singapore than you would ever get moving from Sweden and the European Union to the region. And the support structures in these agreements are many times very, very beneficial. And I guess that any banks or consultant would help anyone of setting up those programs. But and as was said here earlier, India is a very important part in this, and China as well. So is ASEAN, all the 10 ASEAN countries with 650 million, plus China, plus India, and that is something that is really boosting. And should also mention that Singapore, I don't know your knowledge about ASEAN and Singapore, but Singapore is zero corruption. I would say better than Sweden. It's extremely simple to start a company and really get going. And the rate of we've been looking into how many companies are started per capita and so on, and Singapore is doing actually much better than Sweden in the number of companies started in Singapore. So it's a brilliant place to start. Should also mention that we have approximately 450 Swedish students going to Singapore every year, and 450 Singaporean students going to Sweden every year, and I think that's a very good asset for the future as well. There was some mentioning about, and this is maybe sort of part of the bigger picture of what's going on in the world. You know, when Mr. Trump came out and said, let's make America great again, what he actually did in our part of the world, in Asia, was let's make China great again. Everything he has done has boosted China in the region. And all the different countries in Southeast Asia, they want balance. So China will always be a very important player, but they need a balance. And it's clearly so that the US, with the Trump administration, has sort of, I wouldn't say backed off, but it's not pivot to Asia anymore. So in this regard, Sweden and Europe can play, and must play, in my view, a more important role in creating that balance. And that goes for everything. And we have seen here how payments and so on will be important even for governments. So that is also a big opportunity for the future. I think I'll stop there. I usually say at events like this, please come to Singapore and rent an ambassador. I'm for hire. And what I mean with this is that we are, of course, extremely open to support you. We can host events at the residence for you to have a tete-a-tete dinner with your most important client in a nice environment, or bigger events up to 150 people, and we will, of course, have you and support you. We have a challenge, and that's from our neighboring country, Copenhagen. We are best friends in the Nordic countries, but they have already signed a fintech agreement between Denmark and Singapore, and we need to have that in the future as well. So if you really support us in this, we will make that happen. And please come to the FinTech Festival in November. It will be massive. It was great last year and will be even bigger this year. And we have some good people coming from Sweden, also including the head of Finansinspektionen, Erik Thedéen, is coming. So if you go there, you can chase him with regulatory issues as well. Finally, thank you so much, Dusan, another very important person for the Swedish presence in Singapore. And I think that looking into innovation climate and where things happening, you have to find those people who are really engaged. And I've mentioned some earlier, and Dusan, you're surely one of them. So keep going and keep raising the Swedish flag.
Yeah, and thanks, Håkan. I need to say that I've been to many countries. I've never seen such a network ambassador ever. So he really knows how to do it, and he's doing it really in his house. And so it's not actually bullshitting. It's really true what he says. So really, thank you, Håkan, and keep doing that networking.
We'll try to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, FinTech Hub, and my dear friends at Business Sweden and everyone else. It's been a pleasure here today. Thank you.
So thank you for coming. There'll be coffee, water, tea, networking served now. Just a final comment. If you need any information from anything that was spoken about today, please feel free to reach out to any of us at the Hub and we'll of course pass that on to you. Whether it's the FinTech Fest in November or you want direct access to Business Sweden or the ambassador as he's now for hire, you can use us as the conduit. So thank you for coming, have coffee, let's talk, and see you soon.
Matthew, maybe for the developers, what are we doing 12:30 for those who are
staying here?
Yeah, just if there are
so
some.
For the breakout session that Dusan and I are having after this, we're going to stay in this room because we've got so many people coming for the other rooms. So
it's mainly for developers,
it's
right?
mainly for developers, blockchain developers, techie developers.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
Yeah.